Welcome to this episode of the Think and Reform podcast. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Luke Saint, and I want to begin this episode by encouraging everyone to head over to futureofchristendom.org. We've just announced our October 2026 Lancaster County, PA, America Reforged. Join us at Future of Christendom's annual conference in October 2026, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. More details coming soon, but I just wanted to announce that to everyone. We had a very successful conference a couple weeks ago here in Lancaster County, and Jeff Durbin was there. Eli Ayala was there. I was able to meet Eli. What a great guy! Really great presenter. Great presentations. Was there at the conference. Anyone could go up and talk to him, and pick his brain on things. And Jeff Durbin was there. He was great as well. And both of them gave great presentations, and to all the other speakers who gave great presentations, probably my favorite presentation was Conrad Martin's presentation on Buddhism. So it was a great conference on apologetics, and I want to encourage everyone to head over to our YouTube channel where you can see a lot of those presentations. They're coming out right now. Not all of them are out, but if you want to be equipped to deal with some of the presuppositions and some of the worldviews of these different religions, there's presentations on Buddhism and Hinduism, Jehovah's Witnesses, Catholicism, Greek Orthodox, Seventh-day Adventists, Talmudic Judaism, things like that. So if you have the time, go over there and check out Future of Christendom, our YouTube page, and you'll see a lot of great content that we just put out. So speaking of the conference, there was a debate there at the end of it, which Chris Hume partook of. And the original goal of this debate was to have me and Chris versus two atheists, local atheists from the Lancaster Free Thought Society. And what ended up happening was the day before, the morning before, one of the atheists backed out, kind of gave this little speech about why he shouldn't do it and why his friend shouldn't do it either. And he was like, apparently, I think what was going on was he was encouraging his friend not to do it either. But his friend came out, Wilson came out, and very graciously decided to keep his word and debate. So I ended up not participating in the debate, and Chris did the debate. And Chris was kind of vindicated in this because what had happened was we had reached out to the American Atheist Society, or Chris had reached out a couple months ago looking for a debate opponent, and they had recommended Matt Dillahunty, and I guess gave Chris's, and it kind of like CC'd, I guess, Matt Dillahunty on the email or something like that, but somehow Matt Dillahunty was whom they recommended. Chris talked with Matt for a while, and Chris eventually told Matt, we're just going to go with somebody else. And Matt was like, okay, well, what do I do? And Chris was like, listen, we want to invite somebody that we're sure is going to show up, and we're sure that's going to see the debate all the way through. Because if you remember, Andrew Wilson and Matt Dillahunty had a debate, was it probably a couple of years ago now, where Matt Dillahunty stood up very angrily. It's actually very funny. You can go check it out on YouTube. He stood up very angrily, after the first two presentations of the debate, not even halfway through. And he said, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm not going to sit around for this. You can't say these things to me and all that kind of stuff, because Andrew was basically mocking him and his worldview, and Matt got super offended. Which, after listening to some of Matt Dillahunty's presentations, I listened to one recently. It was the Atheist Experience, I think it was. He sat there and he said, what did he say? F Muhammad, right? He said F Muhammad, right? And I think he said a couple times. I think it was Muhammad. And he said, when someone tells me not to say something, I'm going to say it more, right? And I thought that was interesting that he said that on the Atheist Experience, and then got all indignant when Andrew Wilson was, mocking transgenderism. And from what I understand, according to Matt Dillahunty's principles, that's completely legitimate. The more Matt Dillahunty tells him to not do that, the more Andrew should do it, right? I mean, I guess the shoe's on the other foot, I guess. I don't know. But to me, that seemed hypocritical after, hearing it from his mouth, that anytime someone says, you can't say F this person, he says, oh, I'm going to say it all the more. And then Andrew Wilson starts mocking transgenderism, and Matt Dillahunty gets all indignant, like, "Oh, you can't. Here's a sacred cow. You can't talk about that." and that's standard fare from what I've seen from atheism. It's just they just seem to be the vanguard for whatever liberal politics are of the day. It's like they parrot it, they puppet it. I don't know what they do. I mean, it's just. Their ethics always seem to align with liberalism, like, by and large. Obviously, there's atheists who oppose abortion, but they're not monolithic. But there's a from what I've seen, there's a great majority that do just. It just seems like, okay, you're anti-God, you're anti-Christianity. What are you for? Well, I'm for women's rights and whatever sexual perversion du jour is going on. So I'm like, okay, you're liberal, all right. Just seems to always be that way. So, and so all that to say, Chris was justified by not inviting Matt Dillahunty because Chris was afraid. Hey, we're afraid that you're going to back out. And sure enough, one of the guys backed out from the debate, and he backed out from the debate at basically the last minute, the morning before. Got cold feet or whatever reason you want to give. Kind of gave a little sermon about how much we stink and all that kind of stuff, and kind of preached at us for a couple paragraphs, and said I'm not coming to this, and so I'm like, I look at that and I'm like, this is why Chris didn't want to invite Matt, because he was afraid this would happen. So Chris was definitely justified in not, in my opinion, not inviting Matt Dillahunty. His worst fears were realized. Thank goodness we invited too, or else we would have had to cancel the whole thing. And I would have had to get up there and with a ventriloquist act or something. Anyway, so glad I didn't have to do that. So instead of going through the debate, you can go view the debate on YouTube. Debate: Does the Christian God exist? Hume versus Whiting. I'm just going to read the comments. Let's look at some of the comments, okay? And let's just go through some of the comments to see what the people are saying. Enjoyed the debate. Thanks for posting it. Oh, thank you, Matthew. Coltrane 1689. I haven't watched it yet, but I know the outcome. I'm interested to know what Chris does in agriculture. That's probably a reference to something Chris said in the debate. I'm not really sure what that is. Barely Preacher Man says that was painful for atheism. Yeah, and so there's some responses here. Georg von Trapp. Yeah, and they're Barely Preacher Man. Okay, that's my friend Matt Ware. And so these two responses are against what my friend Matt was saying. My other friend Matt, I said, never click so fast. Okay, let's get into some of the trolling comments here. 1 hour and 11 minutes in, this debate is going terribly. Oh my holy goodness, look at this. Oh my, I thought I was going to go through and read this. Oh my word, this is insane. Okay, all right, well, let's just read through some of it. Okay, 1 hour and 11 minutes in, the debate is going terribly. The Christian Hume is appealing to divine command theory to justify the atrocities committed in the Bible like slavery and genocide, also trying to pigeonhole Wilson into hard solipsism. As for hard solipsism, we are justified in believing we exist and reality works the way we perceive it until we have evidence that it doesn't. Atheism is not a dogma with rules of morality, but we as humans can understand what is good for humanity by understanding what makes society flourish and what is detrimental. Okay. Atheism, and this is the problem of atheism right here, right? So you can hold a Christian to the fire with the scriptures, right? Because a Christian, to be consistently a Christian, has to give verbal and spiritual affirmation of the scriptures, right? We have to affirm it. Not only do we have to really, but we love to. We love the scriptures. We meditate upon them day and night. They're a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. Things like that. Let me just turn this down here. I guess hopefully that'll help. We love to meditate upon the scriptures. We love to quote them, and we love to sing them. We're all about the scriptures, right? So it's not hard to hold the Christian's feet to the fire and say, well, here's the Bible believes. Do you believe that? And Mr. Proper FPV 7160 says atheism is not a dogma with rules of morality, right? And so there's a problem, right? Because what's his name? Dawkins. Brian Dawkins get up there and say, Richard Dawkins, not the football player. Richard Dawkins get up there and say, there's nothing in the universe except blind, pitiless indifference. And an atheist can be like, well, that's not what I believe. And you say, well, you're an atheist. You have to believe that. Well, atheism isn't a dogma with rules of morality and stuff like that. We don't all have to believe the same, we don't all have to believe similarly. We can just say, there is no God, and I can reject everything that every atheist set up to here up until now and still be an atheist. You can't be a consistent Christian and reject everything that every Christian ever wrote up until this point. You can't be a consistent Christian. You can't, and you certainly can't reject the Bible. You cannot be a Christian and reject the Bible at the same time. And so that's the frustration of atheism, is that sometimes it's like nailing Jello to a wall. When you try to say, well, this is what atheism believes. Well, I'm an atheist and I don't believe that. And it's because since there is no central body of work, any atheist can basically define it in his own way and in his own manner. And in that sense, it's hard for them to be consistent it's hard to be consistent when you're debating them, because they can just say, well, I don't believe that. Well, I thought you're an atheist. Well, I'm redefining atheism now. Atheists believe this. So for him to say atheism is not a dogma with rules of morality, another atheist would come along and say, yeah, atheism is a dogma with rules for morality. It's wrong to believe in God. That's these kinds of things. It's wrong to do genocide. It's wrong to enslave other people, right? Someone can just as easily come along and make that claim. So that's the frustration I have with atheism, is that anyone who is an atheist can basically use it like rubber and just stretch it and put it wherever they want, and just say, well, I don't believe that, whatever. Morality is an agreement on how we want to interact with each other to promote a better society for us and future generations. Oh my goodness. Oh, these guys. Oh, morality is an agreement. Yeah. I'm sure when this guy was born into the world, someone came in and said, hey, do you agree with this? And we all sat down and we said, yeah, I agree with this and all that kind of stuff. Morality is an agreement, right? So if we all agree that transgenderism is stupid and dumb and should be illegal or what have you, that's fine, right? We can't judge it, right? Because it's what we think for future generations. You can't possibly judge another culture. How could you possibly judge another culture and say they were wrong? That's what they agreed to. You just have to embrace it. You have to accept it, right? You can't judge them. Morality is an agreement. So if the Nazis agreed altogether, let's get rid of the Jews. Hey. How can you possibly get up there and stand up there and pretend like there's a God and say, no, that's objectively wrong? It's this kind of silliness you have to put up with. And okay, my guys, obviously triggered here because we're like 1,000 words in here. Oh, there's a second comment from him. Oh, goodness. Thank goodness it's much, much, much smaller. So let's just kind of focus in on this one. The truth. No, that's capital N, capital O, exclamation mark. This is proper FPV 7160. No, not as far as we can tell. Arguments aren't evidence. Until you can confirm a God exists, you're just convinced stories are true based on insufficient evidence, also called faith. What's more likely, resurrection or just fiction? What's more likely, virgin birth or a teenage girl who lived in a culture where unwed pregnancy was a crime worthy of execution lied? What's more likely, eternal punishment or disbelief? Or it's just a lie designed to control people with fear? I could go on, but is it necessary? All right. Yeah, I guess my guy's seriously triggered here. And that happens. Even I get triggered sometimes watching videos and things like that. And I guess I don't really have... I guess I'm never led to post a whole comment. A whole angry screed over here. But it happens to everyone. But this guy right here, he's he said he just convinced stories are true based on insufficient evidence, also called faith. And are you talking about the Bible? Or are you talking about the Big Bang? I reject your evidence. Whatever it is, I just reject it, right? That's what atheists do. Well, right back at you, atheists. Whatever your evidence is, I just reject it. It's not good enough. I'm the judge. Your belief is on trial. I found it insufficient. And since you weren't there at the Big Bang, you're just believing people who interpret the same data that other people interpret to mean that it's a Big Bang. And so, you have faith that it happened. You weren't there. No one was there. It happened billions of years ago. So that's called faith. That's what we like to call faith around here. Faith also requires that you believe that God does not exist. That's a faith claim. You can't prove a universal negative. You can't prove to me that God doesn't exist. You just have to go to your limited experiences. Silliness. Say that, you have faith and we don't. That's a classic new atheist approach. You have faith and we don't. Yeah, whatever. No, everyone's got faith. Again, I arrived at the Whiting's second rebuttal. Judging by the things he is saying, I think he did not understand Hume's position. We'll see if things become more clear in the cross-exam. And the reply to that was, wow, I am maximally certain he didn't understand the argument. His position fell apart at lightning speed in the cross-exam. And that was a phrase that Wilson was using, I'm maximally certain, because he couldn't claim knowledge. So he just had to say, I'm maximally certain. Which is not really a way to use that phrase and to, criticize his phraseology there. When we tell, our children that we love them, and they say, do you really love me? And we say, yes, I'm maximally certain. No. We don't live like that. We don't say that. Our actions don't reflect that I'm maximally certain I love you. We just don't live like that. No, we love our kids. We love our parents. We love our loved ones. And we don't say, yeah, I'm maximally certain that I love you, right? Nobody lives like that. All right. Maximally certain. That sounds like a gambling, attitude that could make you lose a lot of money. But nobody lives like that. You can say all the time, oh yeah, I'm maximally certain, but we don't live like that. Okay. I'm not maximally certain that slavery is wrong. I know that slavery is wrong. All right. The Bible condemns slavery as understood by the atheists. Whatever the atheists say, basically, about slavery is what the Bible condemns, because they don't read it. They just, pick a certain passage and say, oh, do you believe this? Chris talks about this on his podcast. If you go check out the Lancaster Patriot, he's got a great presentation on it, because, they never fail. They always fail to bring, I don't even think they know Deuteronomy 23:15 exists, which is you shall not return a fleeing slave to his master. In fact, you have to let him you should give him a place to live, and you should not mistreat him. And I know it's controversial to say, but that's basically a law that says if a slave doesn't like his situation, he's free to leave. The magistrate is not allowed to force the slave to return, according to biblical law. There it is, Deuteronomy. You read it for yourself, Deuteronomy 23:15. And that's interesting enough that in the whole history, as far as I know, in the whole history of Scripture, you do not see a slave uprising. You don't see a slave uprising in the book of Judges. I think you see some problems with slaves, like the masters abusing their slaves later after the kings were instituted and they started instituting their own laws. But during the time of Judges, you never see a slave uprising for the 400 years that they were in existence. And that's because the law of God was followed consistently so that if a slave didn't like their predicament, that'd be male and female as well, they could just leave. I know that we don't think of slavery in those terms, but that's how God said it in his law. If you want to leave, you're free to leave. You don't have to stay. Now, again, I talked about this on an earlier podcast. If you are punished for leaving your master or whatever, you're not punished for leaving your master. What you're punished for is if you owed a financial debt and you refuse to pay it back, you're punished for that. Okay? But you're free to go find a different person to work for. You're free to go find another means to pay that money back. But if you decide, I'm in debt to this person, but I'm just going to leave because, hey, I'm not allowed. I mean, I don't have to go back, right? The Bible says as biblical law that you're not allowed to return me. Then what the person who to whom you owe money can do is bring you before a court and say, this person's not paying me back. And then there's other measures you can take, but he doesn't have to go back to the same master that was abusing him ostensibly. And I know that's like news to everybody. I know it's news. But it's right there in Deuteronomy 23:15. And I believe in the same chapter, I think the last two verses concerning slavery in the law of God was, you shall not return a fleeing slave to his master, and you shall not kidnap. Exodus says you shall not kidnap anyone. Deuteronomy says you shall not kidnap your brother. But the last two ones are like, you're not allowed to kidnap, and you're not allowed to return a fleeing slave to his master. And maybe atheists just don't even know those exist. They don't read the Bible, don't care about the Bible, whatever. They just find the bad parts on their Reddit threads and like, oh, fake outrage, and I can't believe this, and silly things like that. Tony Maselli says seed planted. Ooh, is this another screed? Okay, no, it's not. Good. John Wayne, JNWAYN, one day ago said this was just a presuppositional effort by the Christian. Nothing he said made any sense. You can't walk into a debate and tell your opponent that logic couldn't exist without your belief being true. That's arrogance. Both of you walked in as humans, which already entails that there's knowledge and logic. So if that's even one of your arguments, you really have nothing worthwhile, because if you had a good argument, then you wouldn't need to add such a terrible argument to its support. What you have is a pack of bad arguments, thinking they accumulate to a good conclusion, but they don't. 1,000 bad arguments all amount to just bad arguments. Okay, so what Chris is saying when he says that knowledge can't, the logic can't exist without God, the argument is consistent in that using language presupposes logic, right? We have things like word order, we have tense, we have context, we have tone, we have body language. These all presume logic, right? So you have to presume that logic exists when you speak. And Chris said this in his argument, he got up there and he made a nonsensical phrase. He used a phrase that was completely nonsensical, it made no sense. And he said, see, I just gave a phrase where I didn't use logic, right? And you see how silly it is. So for me to communicate to you, we all have to presuppose that logic exists. And since we presuppose that logic exists, we have to put our faith in something that's outside of our senses, right? Logic can't be seen, it can't be felt, can't be tasted, can't be heard, can't be smelt, these kinds of things. So you have to believe in logic. You have to put your faith that logic exists and that there is a standard that's holding us. There's a standard there that's holding us to a certain conduct that we must follow in order to communicate, in order to receive communication, in order to argue, in order to say that you're wrong and this is wrong and this is right. We have to presume that logic exists. And Chris's argument was basically that, with the Big Bang, in the universe, you have to ask, well, where do these rules come from? Is it nothingness that's controlling these laws of logic? How do you account for logic in your worldview? The atheist really can't. He can just basically say that, yeah, logic exists, or I believe in logic, but he can't account for them, doesn't know where they come from, and he cannot give a consistent account for the idea of logic. Even though he uses it, he doesn't know where it comes from. Because to say, well, I reasoned to it, is somewhat contradictory in that since your reasoning faculties are flawed, everyone's reasoning faculties are flawed. Since your reasoning faculties are flawed, to reason to logic is basically to say that your reasoning is perfect. And when you say that your reasoning is perfect, you're denying the reality in which you live. So, we all know that logic exists outside of our own brains, right? We didn't create logic. There's principles right now governing the universe that, whether we believe in them or not, they still exist. So whenever you use language, you presuppose logic, and when you presuppose logic, you have to presuppose God, because in a Big Bang system, in a chaotic universe that brought us about for no reason and no purpose, and everything's chaos, logic cannot consistently have a place. It cannot consistently have meaning, and it cannot consistently have definition. So it's not a bad argument. It's a very sound argument. And let's see, here's another screed over here. Oh no, it's not that bad. Salem KTY4T1 said, the fact that Jesus never fulfilled any of the Old Testament prophecies. Oh, that's funny. Well, that's an ignorant one. Means no one could believe he was the Messiah if someone partially does something that actually means they didn't fulfill something. For example, riding a donkey into Jerusalem was something done every day during this time period, so it's not impressive. However, the Messiah, according to the Old Testament, Zechariah 9:9-10, would ride a donkey triumphantly as a king, ruler of Israel in Jerusalem, because he conquered the enemies and there would be peace from sea to sea. The fact is that the fact is the exact opposite happened during the time Jesus lived. Instead of being triumphant in peace, they were conquered with no peace. So clear Jesus wasn't the Messiah. Let's see here. Angus MacGyver 83 said, "Nice try, bot." And another person said, "Imagine admitting to being outsmarted by a bot." Okay, so let's go to his passage there. Zechariah 9:9-10, right? Nine through 10. Rejoice greatly, O daughter. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you, righteous and having salvation is he, humbled and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. I will cut off the chariot of Ephraim and the war horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall speak peace to the nations. His rule shall be from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. Okay, and so the claim here was triumphantly as a king of Israel into Jerusalem, because he conquered the enemies and there would be peace from sea to sea. Well, that's not what it says. It says, I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the war horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall speak peace to the nations. His rule shall be from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. It doesn't say that he has done it already by the time he's going in. And that's not the only place. There's another, I think, in the Psalms that talks about this. So it's not just Zechariah 9. So that's not a very good exegesis there, Salem. Not really living up to your name, are you there, pal? Yeah. So that's a very bad proof text for be like, oh, Jesus didn't fulfill any of that. I mean, if someone, right? For example, riding a donkey in Jerusalem was something done every day during this time period, so it's not impressive. Yeah, he didn't just ride one into Jerusalem, my guy. The whole crowd was lined up throwing, palm branches at him. All right, is that something that happened every day, my guy? No, stop it. Come on, this is ridiculous. And he's back again, triggered again. Imagine what the Jewish people who saw Jesus claiming he was the Messiah thought. What signs would they be looking for? First, they would be looking for a ruler of Israel / a king of Israel, right? Was Jesus the ruler / king of Israel? Answer, no. So this is really interesting because he seems to be taking the same approach that like the people of Israel did at that time. They're like, you can't possibly be a conquering king, right? Because you got crucified, right? That was their approach. That's why Peter's busting out the sword, cutting people's ears off. Like, we're all expecting a conquering king, because that's what we got. Those are the passages that we paid attention to, and not the other ones concerning the Messiah. We thought he was going to be this guy who comes in and sets up his rule and reign right now. And Jesus kept reminding him that you're misunderstanding what's going on. The Son of Man must be lifted up. He must be crucified. He kept telling him over and over. And then he came back as a conquering king to destroy Jerusalem in AD 70. So he's like taking the position of the Jews from that period that, Jesus was trying to give them the full picture. Like, they only had a partial picture. And my guy back here is 2,000 years old in his understanding of Christ. The Messiah will conquer all Israel's enemies and there would be everlasting peace. Did Jesus do that? Answer, no. Again, only taking a small selection of scriptures into that. Oh boy, here we go. Oh, a bunch of stuff. That's just because Jesus wasn't the Messiah, just some guy who lied and made false/failed prophecies. We got two. Oh, okay. What? Okay. Christians go Jesus shopping in Tanakh and believe the distortions of its writers that you find in Matthew and Paul. As you point out, they know the donkey bit, 2 donkeys in Matthew, which anyone can do, but not the next verses. Psalm 22, nothing about piercing and Psalms are not prophecies. What? Psalms are not prophecies? What are you talking about? Go to the UN and see one of the biggest messianic prophecies on the wall. Proof he wasn't their Messiah. I'm an atheist and there is a terrible war in Ukraine. Very few Christians read Hebrew, in my limited experience, and are sitting ducks for the manipulative dishonesty of the New Testament. I'm with Hitch on the resurrection. Even if it happened, big deal. It doesn't prove God is involved or that the teachings are valid. The world did not change in the way that we can all see, which is core to the Messianic age. Even if you are demonstrably correct. Again, this is called special pleading. The world has to change according to the way that I think it should change. My definition of what peace means, my definition of victory in time and history. And if it doesn't meet that, then it must be false. We can't let the Bible explain with the prophecy of the mustard seed or the prophecy of the golden statue that gets struck on the feet, and then the rock that struck it grows to become a mountain. We can't believe that. That's irrelevant. It has to meet my special pleading, my conditions. And if it doesn't meet my conditions, then, it must not be true. So another, not very strong arguments, especially under cross-examination, but just atheists, doing their thing, bringing up their objections, standard fare. So those are the comments so far on it. So if you head on over to Future of Christendom, you can see debate, does the Christian God exist? Hume versus Whiting. Okay. So real quickly on that, as far as like the kingdom coming and, peace and things like that, we believe that the Bible teaches that Christ's kingdom is gradual. It's not instantaneous. It's not like a snap of the fingers and suddenly everything is at peace. None of the scriptures really teach us that. One of the most quoted verses in the New Testament is, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. Christ sat down at the right hand of the Father, and the process of turning God's enemies into his footstool is happening now, but it's a process, right? And no one ever said it was going to be instant. No one said it was going to be instantaneous. The Bible doesn't teach that. So the kingdom is gradual and not instant. And so to say like, as soon as Christ was resurrected, there should have been peace everywhere. No, that's not really what the Bible teaches. And to force that upon the text is to be ignorant of the text, really. Okay. Now, I want to just briefly talk about, a passage here in Job. And I think I've talked about it before, but I just want to bring it up again. Job 29. I think this is important when we talk about the role of the magistrate, and just compare what Job was able to get done with with what our politicians are able to get done. So Job 29, and Job again took up this discourse and said, "Oh, that I were as in the months of old, as in the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone over my head, and by his light I walked through darkness, as I was in my prime. When the friendship of God was upon my tent, when the Almighty was yet with me, when my children were all around me, when my steps were washed with butter, and the rock poured out of me streams of oil. When I went out to the gate of the city, and I prepared my seat in the square, the young men saw me and withdrew, and the aged rose and stood. The princes refrained from talking, laid their hand on their mouth. The voice of the nobles was hushed, and the tongue stick to the roof of their mouth. When the ear heard, it called me blessed, and when the eye saw it, approved, because I delivered the poor who cried for help, and the fatherless who had none to help him. The blessing of him who was about to perish came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. I put on righteousness, and it clothed me. My justice was like a robe and a turban. I was eyes to the blind and feet to the lame. I was a father to the needy, and I searched out the cause of him whom I did not know. I broke the fangs of the unrighteous and made him drop his prey from his teeth. Then I thought, I shall die in my nest, and I shall multiply my days as the sand. My roots shall spread out to the waters with the dew all night on my branches. My glory fresh with me, and my bow ever new in my hand. Men listened to me and waited, and kept silence for my counsel. After I spoke, they did not speak again, and my word dropped upon them. They waited for me as the rain, and they opened their mouths as for the spring rain. I smiled on them when they had no confidence. In the light of my face they did not cast down. I chose their way and sat as chief, and I lived like a king among his troops, like one who comforts mourners." And I usually bring up this one a lot to just say this is what we're missing, right? This kind of person, they exist, they're out there. But since we don't give people like this the position that they need, which is to judge the cases, and judge according to God's law. But we have to judge according to man's law. But since we don't have a position for somebody like this in our system, people like this just walk around and their hands are tied. They can't fulfill the role. Like this is like a Michael Jordan of judges right here that we're looking at. Like probably one of the greatest of judges, right? He's doing a lot here. He's I delivered the poor who cried for help, and the fatherless who had none to help him. The blessing of him who was about to perish came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. I put on righteousness, then it clothed me. My justice was like a robe and a turban. I was eyes to the blind and feet to the lame. I was a father to the needy, and I searched out the cause of him I did not know. Okay, so he's giving justice to people, right? He's allowing these people who didn't have a voice before to have a voice in his presence, and he's meting out justice, right? That's what he's doing. He's not legislating. He's not making up new laws. Doesn't need to do that, right? But he's fulfilling the role of judge according to the way that God has meant the role to be fulfilled, right? And so if you could imagine Michael Jordan before basketball, what would he have done before sports, before professional sports? Would he have been as great? I think probably not, right? Probably would have never been known before sports. But since the opportunity was there for him to play basketball, he became one of the greatest. But if there was no basketball, we probably wouldn't even know his name, right? And this kind of stuff is going on. It's like we don't have. This is like a Michael Jordan. And imagine he didn't have the position of judge. He would be severely limited in his abilities to bless those around him, to have a presence. Excuse me. So, since we don't have a system that rewards people like this but punishes like this. I mean, you try to go into politics and you try to act like this, like righteously, and you put on righteousness and you put on justice like a robe and a turban, you'll get kicked out so fast. I mean, you'll be called a bigot. You'd be called a fascist or whatever the label they'll throw at you, and you'll be sued, frankly, if you try to judge righteously in our system, right? So there's people walking around who would be great judges. They would just, that's what the Lord made them for, to be a great judge. But since we don't have this position available, and we don't have godly positions in our government, everybody suffers, right? Because the widow, the orphan, and the sojourner in this nation are all oppressed or oppressing others. And the imbalance that we see in our nation reveals itself in a lack of proper government, of the governmental sphere, the civil sphere, making positions that are actually godly and righteous. So if we had this position available, like we should have, like a godly and righteous judge that's judging according to God's law and is giving people justice, that's his responsibility. If we had that, we would have people like this walking around whom we'd say, that was a great guy. Yeah, he gives people justice. Absolutely. Gave me justice just the other day. Things like this. Just remember, in God's system, the righteous are perpetually at an advantage. Whoever's in sin is at a disadvantage in the court. Man's law, when it's instituted, puts those who sin at an advantage artificially, right? It doesn't matter whether they've broken God's law or not. Did you break man's law? And so whether or not you're righteous according to God's standards is irrelevant. You've just broken this arbitrary law over here, and you could totally be in sin, right? And this other guy could totally be in the right. But if you've broken man's law, you're at a disadvantage arbitrarily. Where God's system puts those who are in sin perpetually at a disadvantage in the courtroom. And this is also addressing things that are not necessarily listed like directly as crimes, like someone's like walking around naked, right? Okay, so that's immoral, right? But someone next to me, or I'm a judge and two people come up to me and they say, okay, well, this guy was walking around naked in his yard, and my kids can see it, and so. Then the naked person can be like, well, Your Honor, I'm taking this guy to court because he shot me with paintballs. Well, why did he shoot you with paintballs? Well, because I was walking around naked. And judge would be like, okay, well, don't walk around naked. But Your Honor, he shot me with paintballs. Well, what was he supposed to do? Just sit there and watch you? No, if you walk around naked, you're going to put yourself in a position, and you want to do public nudity, you're going to put yourself at a position of disadvantage. And basically, almost anything anyone does to you is your fault. You shouldn't be walking around naked. And so that way, you're in God's system, the wicked are perpetually at a disadvantage in the courtroom, whereas the righteous are perpetually at an advantage. If you're in the right, not even the wicked and the righteous, it's who was doing right and who was doing wrong according to God's standards. If you're doing wrong according to God's standards, you're perpetually at a disadvantage in the courtroom. Whereas man's law reverses that and puts the righteous at a disadvantage and puts the wicked at an advantage, unfortunately. So I want to go to this video right here. I want to talk about this. Let's just play it, and we'll talk about it here.
It's a very weaponized politics. It's about identifying an enemy. If we get X group out, then we will no longer have problems.
What enemy have I identified?
Okay, so talk to me about immigration. So when I've seen you talking about clips where we're hearing the word Ethiopians and racist, and we're tarring
you heard me say the word Ethiopian and racist?
Yes.
When did you hear me say that?
Rapists.
Rapists, yes, because there have been illegal migrants have been allowed into this country that have gone on to sexually assault girls.
Correct.
Do you condone that?
Why are we tarring the entire Ethiopians? We've just spent the top half of this...
Because it was... Hang on. I'm sorry. But when you allow people, unvetted men, into our country who you have no idea who their history is, and you put them in a town and village, and you subject them to young girls who are walking in the streets, and they end up raping a girl or sexually assaulting a girl, of course I'm going to call it out.
Listen. Why is it not enough?
Would you not think it's right to call it out?
Why is it not enough to say, let's take measures on immigration? The minute you start
taking measures on immigration.
The minute you start referencing specific groups, The association in
What
people's minds
specific
is,
groups?
if I encounter an Ethiopian, this is now the person we're talking about. We just spent the whole top of the show talking about Prince Andrew, and yet I've never heard you say abolish the royals. You can treat it as a case study. So what I'm saying to you
The royals
is...
are part of Britain. We are importing rapists and terrorists into this country through our open borders. You cannot deny that. How many rapes is too much for you to say it's not okay? How many rapes would you accept?
This is my question to you, right? We are talking about instances. We know that there are rapists in Britain, right? Already here. You've described them as homegrown rapists before. That is very different. The homegrown rapist, that's almost a juxtaposition. It doesn't make any sense as a term of condemnation, right?
Yes, of course it does. Any rapist is condemned by me. I was a criminal prosecutor and I'm a mother of daughters and I'm a woman myself. Of course they are. Don't put words into my mouth. But we have homegrown rapists. That does not excuse us importing more and putting them in towns and villages. I'm sorry, I'm not going to back down from that position, and I think you'll find most of the British public completely disagree with you. And if that certain rapist that I mentioned happened to be Ethiopian, then yes, I'm not going to shy away from saying that he was Ethiopian, because that's what happened with the Pakistani rape gangs. People didn't want to say where they were from, and it was they were proliferated.
Yes, but you're applying it to a wide group. When
no,
actually
I'm applying it to
is
illegal migrants who are allowed into this country. That is not a wide group, that is a specific
But it's not
group.
all illegal migrants.
How do you know? Are they vetted? How do you know?
Because we know that we're talking about instances.
How do you know that every man crossing on that boat is not a rapist or a terrorist? We know that one was a convicted terrorist.
But just to be clear, you don't know.
No, I don't know, but I'm not going to give them the benefit of the doubt because they have thrown their passports, they've entered this country illegally, so I will treat them as criminals, yeah.
Okay, so very interesting video. Obviously, she clearly won that. Clearly won that debate. And let me remind everyone to look. Don't think that the liberals care about the sojourner. They don't. They don't care about immigrants. They do not care. Okay, it's a bargaining chip. It is a political talking point. The liberals don't care. Okay, they don't care. We saw what happened, with New York City. It's all well and good for these people to use the immigrants and Martha's Vineyard. It's all well and good to use these immigrants as a political bargaining chip. But when it comes to time to actually, take care of these people and to feed them and clothe them, the liberals, they're nowhere to be found. Yeah, you might find a soup kitchen here and there. But generally speaking, they don't care about the migrants. Okay, they don't care. It's just a political talking point. Okay, they do it because they're just trying to be anti-conservative. They don't care about the migrants. Get that through your thick skull. They do not care. All right, they're fraudulent. They don't want to help these people. It's just virtue signaling. They do not care about the least of these. They just don't care. So that being said, what I want to, the problem that I have with this, she brings up this point. Let me just rewind it here and just play it again.
Rapists,
yes, because there have been illegal migrants have been allowed into this country that have gone on to sexually assault girls.
Correct.
Do you condone that?
Why are we tarring the entire Ethiopians? We've just spent the top half of this...
Because it was... Hang on, I'm sorry. But when you allow people, unvetted men...
Okay, that's the problem that I have right there. When you allow people, unvetted men, I think we need to critically look at this idea of vetting people, right? Let's just have a look at it, okay? What in the world could possibly tell you, you're just an agent at the border, that this person is a rapist and the person next to him is not? What's the difference? You vet them, okay? What question are you going to ask that's going to make them give away, hey, I'm a rapist and I'm here to rape? Think about it. Okay, we vet them. Okay, I'm going to vet this Ethiopian. Are you a rapist? No. Okay, go ahead in. Okay, we all know that's ridiculous, but my question is, what indication are you going to get out of that meeting that's going to tell you that this guy's not a rapist? What does rapist look like? What does rapist talk like? What's a rapist background? Did they not come from all walks of life? How do you vet a rapist? How can you say, yeah, I kept out rapists? How would you know? Oh, because someone said they were. Hello, have you been to America? Have you seen what's happened with those 5 hockey players? Call them all rapists. The Duke lacrosse team. Call them rapists. Well, that must be true. I guess we should deport them. How can you vet someone who's a rapist? We're going to tell you their entire history and their thoughts. You're going to, like, I don't know, put like some sort of helmet on them, say this guy's thinking about rape. How do you vet a rapist? And just let me remind everyone, when it comes to your kids, what do we keep telling each other? Hey, listen, even family members, you have to watch out for even family members with your kids. That's, I'd say probably, I've never looked this up, but I think I'm probably in the ballpark when I say about half of the rape and abuse cases come from a family member. Half of them. Maybe even most of them. Not just some random Ethiopian, but it's your freaking uncle. It's your stepdad. It's your, I don't know, your stepmom. These abuses. Or this is a popular one, your mom's girlfriend who's living with you. How do you vet a rapist? And just think about it. I mean, an employee, you see an Ethiopian, right? He's in your town. He's walking around. And suddenly you're scared. Uh-oh, an Ethiopian. All right, I heard these guys are rapists, right? They come from a third world country. I don't trust them. I don't like them. I'm going to keep my kids away. And then an employee comes running up to you, a government employee. It's okay. I vetted him. That means what exactly? You would trust this vetting process? Because then you would ask yourself right there, well, how do you know he's a rapist? How do you know he's not a rapist? How do you know he is a rapist? I got the government's word that this guy's good, this guy's okay. You know what that means to me? Nothing. So we do vet him, but what does it mean to me? It means absolutely nothing to me. That I somehow trust the people in my country more? These pagan, baby-murdering, God-hating, homosexual-loving representatives of the state vet these people? Oh, thank goodness. They vetted them. They must be okay. What are we doing? Who are you people out there that argue for vetting? I want to know. I mean, like, you're going to walk up in there, at the border. Hey, what are you here for? What are you doing? Yeah, I'm here to rape people. Oh, you can't come in. Oh, shoot, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have given it away. What are we doing here with vetting? Like, you're going to actually stop rapists. That is so ridiculous. Unvetted men. Vetted by these pagan, again, baby-murdering, God-hating, homosexual-loving people. Representatives of the state, bootlicking statists, are going to vet everybody and let only the good people in? Are you crazy? That is so stupid to think that. To think that, like our government's going to keep the bad people out. Our government loves bad people. Have you ever read Proverbs? They love bad people. They love generating people. If anything, they're probably looking for rapists to let them in. The whole idea of vetting, I don't understand. We don't vet people here in the land. We have our own process of vetting people, who we associate with. And because we've instituted man's law, let's say that Ethiopians have a really bad history. She said, brought up, I think it was the Afghani rape groups or whatever. Let's say you said, okay, I don't really trust the Afghani people. I don't trust the Ethiopians. God's law allows you to discriminate and say, listen, I don't know you. I don't trust you. I don't want to do business with you, and I don't want to be associated with you, right? Doesn't mean that I have to somehow abuse you, but maybe I don't want to sell my house to you and let you into my neighborhood, right? Because I don't trust you, right? But that's what God's law does. God's law allows you to make that decision. But since we've rejected God's law, we're now forced at gunpoint to sell to anybody who wants to buy your house. You have to. You can't discriminate. You have to bake that cake. You have to give that loan. You have to sell that house. Right? we would actually be able to protect our communities just a tiny bit better if we were allowed to say, I'm in charge of who I sell to and I'm in charge of with whom I do business. I don't want to do business with this people group over here. That's fine. You might be sinning if you say that, right? You might be in sin, right? You might not be in sin, right? There are some nations that have a really bad history. They have a really bad reputation. So you're perfectly within your rights to say, I don't want to do business with those people. But you might have bad reasons to do it. Okay, but you're in sin, but you're not breaking the law. You don't have to. I mean, God's law never puts a gun to your head to say you have to do business with with every people group that you come across. You're supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. But that doesn't mean you have to sacrifice what you believe to be the safety of your community just for virtue signaling points. Since we've rejected God's law, we have problems like this because the righteous now have their hands tied, and the righteous people are the ones to deal with this problem. A righteous population that doesn't have their hands tied. People bring it up all the time. Oh, coming into your house, coming into your house, coming into your house. Listen, as far as the coming into your house argument, you wouldn't let anyone into your house without blah, 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 without vetting and blah, 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 right? That's irrelevant to the argument. I don't let anyone I don't know. That includes other Americans, right? Does that mean all Americans have to be vetted? Using that same argument, hey, you don't let anyone into your house who you don't know, so you have to vet them. Right. This includes, in my mind, other Americans. I don't let them into my house until I at least have some sort of measure of trust there, right? That means every American has to be vetted, right? Being consistent with that application, with that illustration. That means people who live here, who I do not trust, must be, we got to vet everybody. We got to have a social credit system. That's the best way to do it. That whole, you don't want to let this person into your house argument is an argument for social credit when it's consistently played out. But imagine letting people into your house with your hands tied. That's what's going on. There is there's chaos in the living room of the nation where all the righteous people are there, but all of their hands are tied and they're not allowed to fight back as wicked people beat the snot out of them. Why? Their hands are tied by legislation. They're not allowed to discriminate. They're not allowed to prosecute wicked people. They're not allowed to bring their case before a judge. We've legalized sin and we promote sin in this nation, and we've put the righteous people the righteous population at a perpetual disadvantage in the courtroom. And they are not equipped to fight back at the wickedness. That's what we get with man's law. That's what's going to happen all the time. 100% of the time, that's what's going to happen. God's law perpetually puts righteous people at an advantage in the courtroom, at an advantage in society. Whenever you're doing God's law, you're at the advantage. You're doing something right. But with man's law, when we institute it, we put the righteous at a disadvantage. And right now in this country, the righteous people have their hands tied behind their backs, and they're getting the crap kicked out of them by the wicked people because it's legal. We've legalized it because, hey, we don't need God's law. What we need is a legislative body. And a legislature, when it passing laws, bills, millions of laws everywhere, and the result has been the righteous people, we can't fight back. It's illegal to fight back. It's illegal to do anything righteous. We've outlawed righteousness, and we have instituted sin. And as a result, we can't deal with immigrants because we're not allowed to fight back. The solution is not to vet everyone. That's not going to work. That's ridiculous. Stop it. They're going to come in anyway around your little vetting process. They're going to find a way around it. And once they find out about your vetting process, they're going to find out the right words to say and the right documents to present. It doesn't matter. You can't police that many people. It's impossible. The solution to these problems is the institution of God's law, recognizing Christ as King and allowing righteous people to fight back in the way that God has equipped them to through his law. That's how we fight these things. But no, we can't. We can't do that. Oh, no, that's way too far in the future. We're not ready for that yet. The solution, my friends, is to get your pastor to get off his lazy, pulpitic butt out into the streets to tell the magistrate how he's supposed to act and how he's supposed to perform. That's your responsibility as a pastor. A lips knowledge must pour forth speech. Knowledge, not speech. Let me just read it for you so I can stop butchering it. For the lips of a priest should guard knowledge, and people should seek instruction from his mouth, for he is the messenger of the Lord of hosts. The magistrate should be seeking instruction from the mouths of our pastors. That's what should be going on. But our pastors are so lazy and so wicked and so self-consumed, trying to get their own slice of the kingdom. They won't leave their pulpits and get out into the street and tell the magistrate their business and say, thus says the Lord. Here's how you're supposed to act. How do I know? Because this is what the Bible says. This is what God's word says. I'm going to teach it to you whether you like it or not. Pastors won't do that. They just won't do that. They have to wait for people to come to them, sit quietly in their church, and tithe. But the pastors must be doing that. I'm so thankful that I go to a church where my dad does that. He goes to the commissioners meeting that they have every month, every week. And he goes in and he says, this is what your job is. This is your job given to you by God. Can you imagine if every pastor in Lancaster County did that? Boy, we'd see some change around here. Can you imagine if 10% of the pastors in Lancaster County did that? We'd still see some change. We'd see some awesome change. But since the pastors are like, that's not my job, it's not my responsibility, nothing's going to get done. And then we're going to keep on going to the state to fix all of our problems for us. We're going to go be putting our faith in chariots, putting our faith in princes, which we're told not to do. The prophetic function of the church has been ignored, has been retired, has been lost, has been destroyed. The church is not a prophet to this nation because we won't leave our pulpits and we won't go tell the magistrate what he's supposed to do. And we won't teach the Christian population what we're supposed to do. We won't do it. They have nothing to compare injustice to. They've got nothing to do it. So that's why they have a two-party system. The only thing they have to compare it to is conservatism. That's why they can't think, because they have no idea what God's law requires. They have no idea what God's law says. They've got nothing to compare injustice to. Pastors, you've got to get off your butts. You've got to get out there in the culture. You've got to get out there in the public square, and you've got to get out there in the magistrate's office and say, thus says the Lord. You've got no excuse. This is why the abolitionists are so successful, because they're not waiting around. They're going to the magistrate saying, this is what your responsibility is. And they're not having success in passing any bills. Don't get me wrong. They have a 100% failure rate. As far as I know, they've never succeeded. Yet they're way more successful than the pro-life movement has been in the last 60 years. How'd that happen? They're getting things done. They're changing the conversation. They're changing the expectations of the people. We want abortion outlawed. No more playing around. And they've never passed a bill because they will march into the magistrate's office and say, thus says the Lord. They're doing the job of the church. Imperfectly, yes. Are some of them jerks? Of course. I've seen many drawn to the abolitionist movement that were enticed by it's a one-sided argument, right? I've never seen Russell Hunter lose an argument on the street. Never once. He wins every single one of them. It's too easy. Stop killing babies. Some people are attracted to that, and they turn out to be frauds, right? They're frauds. They're liars. And they're hypocrites. I could name some names. Yes. Bad people. Really bad people. Turned out to be jerks. Doesn't mean what they said was wrong, though, concerning abolitionism. But the abolitionists, they keep failing upwards, as my friend Andrew put it. They keep failing upwards. And God is giving them success because they're doing what the church won't do. They're going out and they're not waiting for the magistrate to sit quietly in their pews. They're going out to the magistrate and saying, this is your responsibility. We're not going to put our faith in princes anymore. No more faith in princes, no more faith in chariots. But trust in the Holy Spirit that he will that he will move and act in a way that he sees fit, in the way that he said he would. that the kingdom will be furthered in ways that we can't see. So we trust the Lord to move in ways, like I said earlier, nobody trusted God, nobody trusted Christ to be crucified. That was not part of the human plan. Nobody trusted that. That was a bad idea, Jesus, as Peter said. But Jesus said, no, that's how it's going to happen. And I'm going to be victorious even through my death. God often uses the foolish things of this world to promote and further his kingdom. And yes, going out, and what the church calls foolish, going out and talking to the magistrate, that's not going to work. We need to do something right now. I believe God does bless that when the church gets off its lazy butt and then begins to speak to the culture authoritatively through God's word. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Think and Reform podcast. Hope it was beneficial to you. I hope you were blessed by it, and I hope that everything we do at Future of Christendom, all the podcasts we do, the debates we do, the books we write, the articles we write, and the podcasts we record, I hope it's all beneficial and a blessing to you as you seek to further the kingdom of God in this world. Thank you so much for listening, my friends, and remember, think and reform.